Hi, welcome back. I'm Matt, and I'd like to do the first in what I hope to be a series of videos going forward of just filling you in on books that I've finished from the shelves here, and then bringing you along for the ride of me picking my next read off the shelves, usually using random number generator to find the next book. So hoping to do that here today. So starting with the book that I finished most recently, and this was 2 days ago now I finished this, and it's The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. So definitely a book I've heard about. It was released in 2006, and Richard Dawkins is a British biologist who has written a bunch of books on religious topics, atheistic topics, and how those intersect, I guess, as well as focusing on evolution and related ideas to that, and other scientific areas. I think he's put out a bunch of books, but this is a pretty prominent one from him. I don't necessarily come to this with any specific strongly held predilection or anything on the topic. I'm just interested in it. I'm interested in reading as widely as I can, as much as I can, on certain science issues. Certain religious issues do interest me. And I think that, if you come to this book, regardless of your beliefs, regardless of where you stand on atheism versus agnosticism versus religiosity, wherever you are on the spectrum, it's certainly readable and enjoyable, I would think. But I mean, I don't think there's any way around the fact that this is, making an argument and trying to do a takedown of religion in a lot of ways. So if that's how you come to this, as not being necessarily receptive to that type of argument, then the tone of the book may not work that well for you. It's not presented as that much of like a scholarly, neutral toned approach. It is coming in with a point, and it is coming in with a predisposed bias, I guess, and against religion in favor of atheism. So I don't think that's much of a surprise to anybody who's heard of Richard Dawkins and heard of this book. But it definitely wasn't to me. So I kind of knew going in what kind of tone the book was going to have. And as far as the reading experience, I enjoyed reading it. I think the writing was sort of engaging enough that it kept you moving. I think I read through the first 150 pages or so in this rather quickly. It does jump into the topics pretty nicely and keep you moving. And then toward the middle, I can recall slowing down a bit. It got a little bit more, I guess, technical in some ways, like going through the early roots of religion, as well as also weaving in like more specific scientific discussion on Darwinianism and how that relates to the spread of religious belief. But I guess if I had to sort of do a single takeaway of this, I guess where I'm settling on it is that I don't feel I came away from reading this with anything profound or new in terms of the arguments and the anecdotes that are presented. And I don't know, that might be for a number of reasons. I mean, it's a 20-year-old book at this point, so its arguments and Richard Dawkins' general, ethos and approach in this discussion is sort of out there at large at this point for quite a long time. So, although I haven't read the book until this point, I have come across excerpts of it. I've come across headlines of Richard Dawkins' statements and interviews he's given and lectures he's done on related topics to what is his point in this book, which is, he's trying to argue that, there's really no evidence, there's no basis for religion or God in that, for that matter. And so while he doesn't say in the book that he can prove that to a 100% certainty, that's as close as he's trying to get with the argument. A lot of those points and arguments I've come across just in the greater internet articles, surfing the news, and just seeing little snippets about that. So I think it was was laid out interestingly, and but what I would say is, on the topic of not necessarily feeling like I got too much new from this, this is a little bit of a niche anecdote here, but if anybody goes back a little ways in terms of using Reddit, browsing Reddit, you might remember that some time ago there was one of the default subreddits that would be on the feed that everybody would just automatically see is atheism. And no matter what, if you browse Reddit, you automatically saw posts from the atheism subreddit. And that was probably happening at a time when I was browsing Reddit. I mean, I still do. And this came out in 2006, so I think those timelines kind of align. To put a point on it, I felt like I was kind of browsing Reddit back in 2006 or 2010 or somewhere around then, when this book came out and a lot of people were talking about the God Delusion, and they were kind of quoting from it and stuff. And again, wherever you come down on the argument on this, it doesn't really matter, but that's just where this took me mentally. It kind of took me back to like browsing Reddit in that time period and being inundated with atheism posts and atheism arguments, many of which directly took from this book, because I think it was kind of prominent and it was in the news at that time. So yeah, maybe the specific experience of me tying reading this to that internet experience that I've had, I couldn't shake it perhaps, and it just made me feel like I was rehashing old Reddit arguments of people in the comments about atheism versus non-atheism. And eventually Reddit changed course on that, and they removed the default subscription to atheism so that any old average Reddit user wouldn't automatically be subscribed to that, which I think makes sense in the end, that it should be something available rather than something by default that's there. But regardless, I've used Reddit long enough to have been the subject of or the viewer, I guess, of enough of those atheism posts and arguments that this felt a little bit like a walk down memory lane of 15 years ago Reddit. And the other thing is, I think that, as happens with books a lot, I think the title, I want to say, is not 100% on all fours with the content all the way through. So basically what I mean by that is, the argument is supposed to be, the title's The God Delusion, so to me that means this is a scientific approach, or this is a scientific discussion of, in Dawkins' argument, why there is no God, or why belief in God is a delusion. And certainly he goes at that, there's no doubt about it. In fact, chapter 4, and there's about 10 chapters, they're pretty long, like maybe 30-40 pages each. The preceding chapter 3, he lays out arguments for God's existence. And then in chapter 4, you get to why there almost certainly is no God. So to me, chapter 4 naturally is the most on all fours with the title, The God Delusion. So, chapter 4 is where he tries to lay out an argument why there almost certainly is no God. And it's interesting, it's interestingly laid out. But then from that point on in the book, his ultimate argument, I think, is kind of made already by that point. And then you have like 5 or 6 more chapters of related topics, I guess. But it's more so just looking at like religious belief and, why, in his opinion, religious belief is harmful, why in his opinion, atheistic belief is not harmful, vice versa. Some of the other chapter names in here are a little, they could be a little bit inflammatory depending on your viewpoint. But, what's wrong with religion? Why be so hostile? Childhood abuse and the escape from religion. These are some of the chapter names after you get past chapter 4, which again is why there almost certainly is no God. So, the roots of religion, the roots of morality, why are we good? Going over like Old Testament stuff. There's definitely a heavy discussion in here about Old Testament God and why how could religious belief be as widespread, or Christian and related beliefs be so widespread, when the Old Testament God that is the figurehead of this religion is so vindictive and so savage and murderous? And again, that's not necessarily, at least to me personally, that's not an argument that's new to me. That's something that I have heard and been acquainted with a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it ever got too over the top in its anti-religiosity, where you just were overly biased with what was going on, or if you were a religious person, you would have to throw this across the room. I don't think it ever got to that point, but like I said, the God Delusion title kind of draws you in under the premise of, here's the argument for why there is no God, or belief in God is a delusion. And I think that he goes at that in an interesting and engaging way. But I think he covers that ground a little bit in a narrow point of the book. And then a lot of the extraneous stuff is kind of just, okay, so my argument is that there basically can't be a God. So why is religion still around? And here's all the reasons why I don't think it should be. Again, done in an interesting way, done in an engaging scientific way. But if the core thesis of the book is the God delusion, I think you get to that point in somewhat limited fashion and quick fashion in the book, and then it just comes down to your interest in it, if you want to stick around beyond that and dive into more of the weeds of the anti-religious sentiment that Dawkins kind of espouses in here. So again, without putting any specific categorization on myself in this, I do have beliefs on the subject, but rather than get into them, it's just to state that it's an area of interest of mine and many other people who have read Richard Dawkins on this topic and other related topics. So yeah, it was a good read, and definitely interesting, as far as my first foray into Richard Dawkins. So that's what I would say in a rambling, somewhat incoherent way on that book, but that's just kind of my takeaways. So that book's done, and now I would like to transition to part 2 of the video quickly and bring you along with the random number generator selection process for my next book. So let me pause quick, try to set that up, and then we'll continue. Okay, so hello again. So what I did is I assigned a number to all the various shelves throughout the room here, and the shelf number that got picked by random number generator was this shelf right here behind me. So I've tried to organize the little collection in here somewhat by genre as best as I can. And what I've sort of called this shelf is basically like memoirs, travel, nature. It's kind of a mix of those different genres. I tried to err on the side of like somewhat classic-ish memoirs in here that I've heard so much about, or nature or autobiography, travel, anything mixed within that kind of a heading. Not everything in here necessarily fits neatly into that category, but regardless, it's kind of the shelf I have going for that topic right now. So that's the shelf that got picked randomly. And so as far as picking the book, basically just count them up is what I do, and exclude the ones I've read. And this is basically all unread, which is for the most part true of basically all my books in here. So the only book I will exclude, I believe, is this, which is Vladimir Nabokov's autobiography, memoir, Speak Memory. So I did a video talking about this last year, like November or something, for Nonfiction November, which I enjoyed. And pretty much count with me, right? So I'm just going to start on top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So 29 candidates. If I put it in the number generator, let's see what I get. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So this is pretty much how I do it. And it came up with this. The Liars Club, Mary Carr. So this is a Penguin Classics deluxe edition of this. I've heard about this. She is a writer, obviously, uh, and it's her memoir, I guess. It's the 20th anniversary edition of the Liars Club. So let's see. It's got like the flap out sections here and the cool artwork that comes with the Penguin Classic Deluxe, usually. Cool illustration on the back. But so let's see, the Liars Club. When it was first published in 1995, the Liars Club took the world by storm and raised the art of the memoir to an entirely new level, bringing about a dramatic revival of the form. Carr's comic childhood in an East Texas oil town brings us characters as darkly hilarious as any of J.D. Salinger's, a hard-drinking daddy, a sister who can talk down the sheriff at age 12, and an oft-married mother whose accumulated secrets threaten to destroy them all. So yeah, I've definitely heard a lot about the Liars Club, and I think it's somewhat in that category, as far as I can tell, of writer memoirs that are in the classic sort of bubble of those. I think it does focus, at least I believe it focuses on the topic of sort of women writers and the challenges that they've faced to, break into more male-dominated spaces in the literary industry. So I know I've seen interviews with Mary Karr on YouTube from time to time, where she's on panels talking about books and talking about her experience, and certainly talking about this book. So yeah, I'm definitely curious about this one, as I am with any other potential book on the physical TBR in here. So this will be next up, The Liars Club by Mary Karr. So yeah, that will be it for completed book and next book selection. Hopefully I'll be back to check in with thoughts on this one soon and any other reading updates. But thanks a lot for watching.